Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is long overdue. I am finally going to be doing my review on the Ohuhu markers and also their marker pads, because I have, or at least the one that they sent me, I have a few thoughts on it. They sent this to me a couple of months ago and I've been using them since then. They sent me their 216 color set of markers. I know I sound so surprised right there because I didn't actually know that there were this many colors. I know I spent a very long time swatching these, and now I understand why. This is a big set and it came with this swatch cards that I believe is the same paper that they have for their marker pad. They also have a little booklet on information about these colors and this set. Honestly, this swatch card is a lot more important than I initially thought. I don't necessarily like doing swatches for my sets, but for this set particularly, they were crucial, and it's because not a lot of these colors matched the colors on the tip of the markers, and some of them were even really different, not just with just the use in the colors but also the values, which is so weird. And so at first, when I didn't swatch this first, I had a really hard time navigating these colors. My first little drawing with this didn't turn out that well, and I just then decided to do the swatch cards. Now I don't use the markers at all without looking at the swatch cards, because I try not to look at the colors on the cap. I just look at the numbers. There are color names here that I wouldn't normally associate with the colors that they have, like lavender. I think it's just too dark, and also deep lilac. I don't think it's dark enough. There are also some that they use. I don't think that the hues are completely different from what you would expect from the names. Like carmine red just looks so, I don't even know what happened to the carmine red. It doesn't even look red at all. But it's not just the hues. I don't think if this is dark enough, it would still look like carmine. It just looks too yellow. But yeah, some of that, the names I don't think are as important as I think I personally took it, because the names themselves aren't as visible as the color numbers. But what I think is more crucial is the values in the cap is so different too. So when you look at the cap on white 12, it looks like a very light color. But when you swatch it out, it's completely different from what it was on the cap. It also had a reddish undertone to it, which I was really excited about. And so I was really disappointed when it came out looking darker. In general, a lot of these colors don't match the colors on the cap, so I wouldn't even look at the cap colors. Just go ahead and look at the numbers and your swatch card. So I think that it was really important that they provided these. I do also have one marker that dried, and it's called Barely Beige. I think this would have been a beautiful color, and I think they also do replacements if one of your markers ended up dried from when you open them. I think that's really nice depending on where you are. And also maybe I just got really unlucky because I've watched a lot of reviews on these and I haven't watched one that had one marker that dried, so probably just that. They also have a colorless blender, which to me became important in a different way than it was intended for. I don't use a colorless blender that much, but I did have someone on Patreon who told me that they sometimes use a colorless blender to get these really cool effects with the markers, so almost like you would use water with watercolor. So I think that's just so awesome how they came up with that. But for the sketches you'll see in this video, I didn't end up using it that much, and that's because I read that comment after. But I'm trying not to discount the colorless blender at all. It's just that for me, I actually ended up using it like a placeholder for when I would pick up a marker, and I don't want to lose its place in the set. Just because there's so many colors, I wanted to I want it to be placed in exactly the same way that I had it in my swatch card. And so when I would pick up a color, I would put the colorless blender in so I don't lose its place and use it like that. But again, I know the colorless blenders are so important. Just for me, that's how I use it for now. The color selection I wanted to talk about because some of these colors were a little bit disappointing, and again, just because they didn't match the cap colors, but mostly it's in this pink and yellow mini set. I divide them into three: the pinks and the yellows, the greens and the grays, and the blues and the purples. But the yellows and the pinks, I think especially, was just a little bit disappointing because the reds, they are very vibrant and dark, and because of the nature of alcohol markers, the darker they get, the harder it is to layer with them. So usually it's hard to mix your own tones when it gets dark like that. And also there's too many cooler reds for me personally. But the mini set that just blew me away was the grays in this set. There's so many of them that I just absolutely love. And a lot of them are mid-tone, so for me that's more usable for shadows, so they don't completely overpower the colors underneath, especially the red grays. I think I've been missing them so much for grays in general with bigger sets. I just think they need a lot more red grays. So overall, for this mini set, I love this. I love their collection of the grays, also their greens too. Some of them lean blue, some of them lean neutral, and some of them lean neutral warm. I just really love that there's so many differences in the greens in this set. And I think that was what was missing with the reds. The blues, I guess because blue isn't my favorite color, I'm just neutral on the blues. But overall, it's a really good collection. When you look at just the swatches, not the color on the caps, I actually think it's a good selection of colors. And maybe just personal bias on the cooler reds because I prefer warmer ones, but look at how beautiful this gray set is. If you're like me who draw a lot of portraits and lean more towards natural looking earth tones, I think you would love the grays in this set. And so I want to do a review on the marker pad. They sent me this with the rest of the markers and I just really love this. A lot of the time I don't associate a medium with a sketchbook. Even my watercolor sketchbooks, I use gouache and watercolor interchangeably with them. But with the markers, I don't use the markers on other papers now that I have this because I just love how the colors lay on it. They make the blending, at least just laying down the color, very easy because of how smooth the paper is. And maybe there's just some technology that makes this paper so perfect for markers, but whatever it is, I don't use markers on any other paper except for this one. And so it's really good to keep all of my marker sketches in one place. One thing about this sketch pad is the color on the paper is so cool. And so it really messes with the way I choose colors when the paper is very cool leaning. So there's a lot of blue undertones to it. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it on camera. So when I do my white highlights on top, it looks so different from the actual color of the paper that it actually looks very unnatural and just fabricated. I don't know if that is a good word. I think it's a good thing to point out that the color is a little bit cooler. I also asked them if they had a warmer tone variation or a more neutral leaning white, and they said they don't, but they do have other options for sketchbooks. And yeah, I don't know, it's just a very cool leaning paper, and I think that baffles me so much because this is the only paper I have that is that, but that really hasn't stopped me from sketching so much in this sketchbook. I've sketched much more in the sketchbook than my other ones. Some of them because I don't use markers as a main medium. I usually have pencils or very heavy dark line work on top. Some of them didn't end up being that successful, but there's some on here that I just love. This first one that I will be showing you guys, it's just of Kristen Ritter walking on the street, and I just really love this photo. There's two sketches here with her street style inspiration pics, but I just really love this, how this one turned out. Importantly, the blue in the paper doesn't resist warmer colors on top. So when you add in this bright yellows or even just different hues on top, it just changes the colors of the paper. At least it feels that way. It doesn't add on to what was already there. It's really hard to explain, but what I'm trying to say is that when I finished the sketch, it looked like I did the sketch on another paper and cut it and pasted on top of this blue toned paper. It's very different from watercolors where the color of the paper will just show up on top of your finished sketch. With this, it didn't feel that way. And I would have to say that I really love that look. It looks like my sketches are stickers on top, and I just have that look that I want now for my sketches. About the blending with these markers, because I don't blend them that much and I just use a lot of transition colors, I don't really use the colorless blender, but I still think it was really good at blending. It's very different from what I would expect from markers. Like if you just lay them down, they actually settle very flat, and so that quality to these markers was really admirable to me. I didn't think that it would be that easy to lay down flat colors to them, and it was, and so I just really love that. I also love how they work in tandem with the paper because the paper is so smooth, and something about using those two together just makes the inks on this lay down so beautifully on top of the paper, but it also doesn't bleed on the paper, which is something that I also expect sometimes because of how it just settles on the paper. It almost feels like watercolors. You know how when you lay down watercolors, as long as they're wet, they're mostly gonna lay down flat? It feels like that, and it's so beautiful how it does that, but it also doesn't bleed in the edges of your lines, which I don't know how that happens, but I absolutely love that about the markers, and that just made the sketches really fun to do on this paper. I also drew some mushrooms on here, which I just really love. I love that because there are so many vibrant colors in the selection that I've been inspired to draw things that are outside of people. I love the vibrant colors on this first mushroom. Purples and oranges, I love that combination. I also like building up with the lighter colors first before, and there's a bunch here where I played around with the contrast and the values too. And the last one is my favorite drawing ever. I just really love this little frog. No, it's my favorite now, and I don't know, I can't stop looking at it. It's so cute. But I wanted to end this video with some tips for if you are just starting out with markers like I was, or at least in just the perspective of looking at markers and trying to make them stand as their own medium without much heavy line work on top. I do have some tips for you guys that I recently discovered myself. And so the first one is to always swatch your colors. Especially with this set, you want to be able to look at how the color will dry on your paper, and also very important to use the exact same paper that you will be drawing on, because they would look very different if for example, if I had swatched this on my own paper, which would be more neutral, and then I would use the markers on the cooler tone of the sketchbook, that wouldn't look the same. So always swatch your markers and try not to look at the cap when you're choosing your colors, and just look at the color names in the swatch card versus the ones on the cap, and I think that would make it a lot easier. Another one is layering, and this is where it was really hard for me to figure out, because all this time I've been associating markers with highlighters, and highlighters are meant to be very transparent, so you can see the writing underneath, but I've been using them interchangeably, and I think that's why I was having such a hard time with markers. So the main rule for me would be to always look at the values first. If they look light and a little bit mid-tone on the paper, then you can easily layer them and you get really beautiful results on top. But if they are very dark, it's best to leave that for later, so you can play around with the contrast, like what I did with these mushrooms. The very darker colors I added after, so that I can make the shape of the mushroom stand out. But I wouldn't necessarily layer these colors on top of each other, because it would just look like a dark on dark, and we'd get maybe a little bit of shape with them, but you don't really get that beautiful transparent looking layering as much as if you would just use the lighter markers. Just these darker ones would very easily overpower the light ones, so you might want to use them after you've used the very lighter colors. But yeah, that is it for my tips on using alcohol markers from a beginner-ish in the medium, at least just as a beginner, of looking at the alcohol markers as its own thing and not just as a supplement to line work, my ink line works. But I think that advice would really help, especially if you're a painter. I wish I heard that advice when I first started with these, but yeah, that is it for my review on the Ohuhu markers. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys are interested in any real-time sketches and paintings, I have them up on my Patreon, and yeah, I will be seeing you guys again soon.